Super Poly is what the whole Yu-Gi-Oh community typically calls a broken card. It is of course seasonally good because sometimes the best decks don't really lose too hard to it. But as time progresses, we just keep getting more and more Super Poly targets that reinvigorate this card's true potential. I mean, take a look at Garura, for example. We happened to obtain that card last year at the exact same time as Tier Elements and Sprite, and what a coincidence, Super Poly was extremely good that format. I mean, of course, there's a very good reason why Super Poly was banned for so many years. It summons a fusion monster on your own field by using potentially monsters your opponent controls, and doesn't allow your opponent to respond to it. No wonder Jaden was the Supreme King when he had that card. And you already know that a bunch of deck lists are running this card at the moment in their main deck. So today I will be explaining why this card has been gaining a lot in popularity in the current format. As soon as you smash the like and subscribe button. My man. Alright, so first things first, everybody is well aware of the fact that the two best Super Poly targets are Garura and Mud Dragon. With both of these cards, you can cover just about any monsters that have the same attribute. So if you're trying to fuse away two monsters with the same attribute but different types, you're using Mud Dragon of the Swamp. And if they have the same attribute and the same type but different names, you're using Garura. So in other words, the only way to be safe from Super Poly is by having monsters with different attributes or monsters with the same attribute but with the same name. Right? Easier said than done because so far this is only two targets and there are other monsters that you can summon off of Super Poly that make playing around this card extremely difficult. For example, sometimes the attribute of a monster doesn't matter whatsoever. If you are playing a warrior deck, you have a very high likelihood of running into Guilty Gearfried. The Infern Noble deck pretty much only plays fire monsters in their main deck, but then they go into Isolde, which is light, and they can lose out to Super Poly there. So if they're trying to set up a board going second, Super Poly can definitely hurt them really hard. The issue is, going second against Infern Noble, Super Poly might not be as good. On paper, this card looks extremely good going second against their board because they end on a lot of fire warriors. But unfortunately, they do have access to Angelica Angelic Ring, and that gives them a way to negate Super Poly. The Angelic Ring doesn't actually activate, so you're not responding to the Super Poly, it just happens on the resolution of the card. So yeah, if you were holding onto your copy of Super Poly with the hopes of defeating Infern Noble that way, then think again. Ironically enough, I actually believe that Guilty Gearfried performs better against other kinds of decks. Like decks that aren't even warrior-based. I mean, try to think of two warrior monsters that everybody and their mother are trying to summon this format. Oh, I know, Baron de Fleur and SP Little Knight. I mean, these cards are extremely good, so no wonder Super Poly is really good here too. And Guilty Gearfried is also a very good card to summon because it actually has a truly good effect. If you can summon it, then you can break boards even more. So yeah, if given the option to summon this card, I will take it any day of the week. As a matter of fact, the second place deck list from YCS Indianapolis only had space for 4 cards in the extra deck for Super Poly. The first 2 targets were obviously Mud Dragon and Garura, and the third one was Guilty Gearfried. Now, there is a fourth one that is actually really good, but at the same time, it might not be as good as Guilty Gearfried depending on the situation. I say that because it could actually be better sometimes. The card is Dragon Knight Draco Equist, and even though it is definitely very difficult to summon, it makes sense when you see what the other decks are trying to achieve. The card requires a Dragon Synchro very specifically, as well as any warrior monster. The Mana Dome deck loses very hard to it because they're always trying to end on Baron de Fleur, as well as either Bestial Dispatter or the Crimson Dragon to summon the Hot Red Dragon or Archfiend King Calamity. But then it's basically a guarantee that you're always ending on a Dragon Synchro as well as the warrior monster in the form of Baron, or SP Little Knight. And that deck plays a lot of darks and warriors, so you really don't have to worry that much about Super Poly being dead against them. Again, just with 2 targets, you should be able to beat Mana Dome going second very consistently. Now, Dragon Knight Draco Equist can also be very good against Dragon Link if they play into it. Finding the warrior monster might be difficult, but sometimes they do go into Baron, and of course, they're always trying to end their turn 1 with Borreload Savage if possible. But to be fair, nobody really expects Dragon Knight Draco Equist to be played as a Super Poly target, so you can't really blame people too hard for playing into Super Poly. It is up to you to whether or not play this card in your extra deck if you believe that it is worth the commitment. But personally, I do not believe that it will come up as often as Guilty Gearfried. And on top of that, the effect of Dragon Knight Draco Equist is definitely really cool, but it's very niche and I don't think it will come up that often. Unless you're summoning it using your own cards or if you actually play like a Dragon Synchro deck or something. But yeah, if you have to fuse using your own monsters, it kinda defeats the purpose of Super Poly being a very good card. And that was my issue with playing a card like Super Poly against Unchained. Like, people were unironically trying to fuse away their Reino Heart with their opponent Caesar, which I just don't really see doing too much. Anyways, there is another fusion monster that might be not too bad at this format, depending on the circumstances. So Panzer Dragon generically requires a machine any dragon monster, which is actually not too bad. It also has a respectable effect upon being destroyed, which allows you to target 1 card on the field and destroy it. You could fusion summon Panzer Dragon by using your opponent's Rescue Ace machine monster like Preventer or Turbulence. and with the Borload Fusion Dragon, so that way you get rid of their negate on top of, I don't know, their other monster that would make their trap cards live. And then you can crash the Panzer Dragon, destroy another card on the field, or bait the negate of Baron de Fleur if they also have that. Which they probably will. But then again, I don't really think that Panzer Dragon will come up very often because requiring a machine and a dragon is a little specific. Definitely has a lot of potential for the future, so keep that in mind. And also, I recommend keeping it simple with Super Poly and not really going over for Super Poly targets. If you do not believe in Dragon Knight Draco Equist, there's always the Predaplant family. Both Dragos Tapelia and Starving Venom are extremely good and reliable, they never really go wrong. Dragos Tapelia requires any fusion with any dark monster. Starving Venom, on the other hand, requires 2 dark monsters that aren't tokens. So usually you're not trying to play both unless you really want to cover a lot of ground, and especially if you can actually summon one of them. The Tearlaments deck can naturally summon Dragos Tapelia, so that's even better. But Starving Venom is probably the easier one to summon because 2 dark monsters is actually a joke to achieve. Again, SP Little Knight is one of the most popular cards of the format, and it is a dark monster. Now, other decks technically could lose to Super Poly, but I wouldn't really bother. Like the Plexter, Chimera, and Earth Golem Ignister are decent against Cyber's decks, but nobody plays Cyber's decks, so who cares? On a similar train of thought, we also have the big World Chalice Fusion monster. It requires 3 link monsters, but who's ever gonna be summoning 3 links? There you go, thought so. There are more Super Poly targets out there and more decks that can actually play Super Poly really well, like the Chimera deck. Obviously, their fusions require like Beast, Fiend, or Illusion, so if you can use one of your own Beast or Illusion or something, you can use your opponent's Fiend. Which is not too bad against Unchained, but it still doesn't change the fact that Super Poly is still really bad against Unchained. Yeah, speaking of which, what are the decks that Super Poly is just not really good against? Again, it's not really good against Unchained, it's not really good against Infern Noble because of the Angelic Ring, and of course, don't expect it to do anything against Mikanko and Dark World. I mean, that goes without saying, obviously. It is kinda hard to special summon when you're not allowed to special summon and when you don't have cards in your hand. I mean, no shit. Moral of the story, Super Poly is actually a really good meta call at the current format because it is extremely good against really popular cards such as Baron de Fleur, SP Little Knight, Borload Savage, and dark monsters in general. Oh, and of course, if your deck does not lose to Gozen Match, it means that all of your monsters have the same attribute, which means that you're gonna be losing to Super Poly. Pick your poison. Anyways, that's all I had for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.